don't know what I could really add to the hurricane, except most of that last night is I'm sure all of you've seen that, was real good, and you'd be complimented. But that was on the south end of the lake, and actually I was on the north end of the lake, or the northern part of the lake, which is up at Canal Point. My family and myself, we all lived in Pahokee and on Bacon Point Road. Now, I'd like to just give you a little idea. I don't know whether you're all familiar with the lake. The lake is not like it is now. Most of you want to see a lake, you'd probably want to see a dike around it. But Lake Okeechobee didn't have a dike around it in 1928. Didn't have one until after 32 when Hoover was the president, and the Hoover dike was built, and they named it after President Hoover. But that lake is what we call a shallow lake. It's very shallow, and the water will rock back and forth. If you'll just take a plate and put water in it and move it just a little bit, you'll see what action you get. And this is the main problem that was created during the hurricane. Now then, when we built the dike around it, as the government built the dike around it, well then we had more of a bowl shape, and the water now doesn't rock as much, so to speak.
We have the one that we used from an old map from the archives of the library. This was the lake before the dike.
Yeah, the dike, when it was built, it just brought it all up, but it was real shallow. And this is the part down here that you have all the islands out in there, which indicates that it's the shallowest part. We used to say that Pahokee drinking water was better than ours because they could get it out of the deeper part of the lake and didn't have all the settlement down here. But anyhow, when the hurricane came, it pushed all the water down in this area, and most of it you saw on your film is in this area here, from Lake Harbor and South Bay, and some here in Beltway. But up in this area, and up as far as here, we were right out here at Azuka. In 1928, the Southern Sugar Corporation was the sugar mill in the Glades, and it was called Azuka. I believe some of you would come up with know that that stands for sugar in some language. Spanish, Azuka, yeah. Okay, so that would be, we were here, and that's where we spent the night. And I'm sure most of you have been out too.
Is that the Bryant Sugar Mill?
This is Bryant Sugar Mill. Now it's U.S. Sugar. The Southern Sugar Company went bankrupt in the 30s. The stock market got them, and they went out of business, and the U.S. Sugar bought it out, or they reorganized, and then it was U.S. Sugar, and they started grinding there, and they changed it. Oh, it's been in only the last 20, 25 years that they call it Bryant. It was Azuka for a long time. And that's where we spent the night. And now it was the same type of building that you have out here with the co-op, and it has some sheet metal on it, and it has the boilers in it. And those boilers are set in foundations, and was elevated some there. I'm not too familiar with there. I'm sure they've changed them some, but I can remember very distinctly that when we got up there, that this is where my family was located. We got us under a boiler, spread out our blankets and the food supplies and what we carried with us up there, and that's where we spent the night, underneath those boilers there, because we figured if it blows the tin off of the building, at least we'll be protected, and we were. Then backing up a little bit now, you got to remember back then, last night in that film, and I just run through my mind, maybe it's just my family, or I don't recall, but flashlights weren't too prominent back those days either. I mean, we had the regular old kerosene lamp that I studied by, and we had most of our lights. And so, and a radio, the first World Series that I ever heard was on radio, of course, and it was back in the early 30s, and The only way there was about only one or two radios in Pahokee. And we'd go up there and they had a tiny diner up there and the guy wouldn't let us all get in, but the boys, we'd all sit on the outside and listen to his radio and listen to the World Series. So communications was a real problem then. And of course you don't have that today, and now they've got the tracking and the people that can fly into it and tell you exactly where the eye is and what direction and the barometer readings and all of this other good stuff. So you don't have the danger now, except people are not going to take the next hurricane serious. This is what worries me. They're not going to take it serious. They don't believe that a hurricane can do that kind of damage. And I think the hurricane now in South Florida will do more damage than the 28 hurricane did. People are going to stay in these flimsy constructed houses and these trailers, and it's going to wipe them out. And it's going to be a real problem if we ever get one of those hurricanes that come back through here, and I hope we never do. And we haven't really had one in a long time. A real hurricane where you come over with the eye and experience the eye that we did at that time. So don't let anybody kid you that the houses are built better and all this other stuff, because when you get caught in a vacuum, if you've ever played around with a vacuum, you can know what will happen. And that's what a storm will create. So we was in right in the middle of that eye, and I'll never forget that. We called it a lull then. I heard that word used last night. It wasn't even identified as the eye of the hurricane at the center. It was called a lull, and we got right in that thing. And I can remember opening that old sliding metal door on that sugar mill, and these people saying, well, don't go out yet. It may not be over. I mean, some of them said, well, I want to go see about Aunt so-and-so, or Uncle so-and-so, or cousin so-and-so, and they went out. And I can remember them keeping that door open until it took several men to close it, because they were waiting for them to get back, and they didn't ever come back, and they finally had to manpower and close that sliding door, push it against the wind in order to slide it back in position. And the second half of the hurricane wasn't as bad as the first half, but it was, because then we'd been up there some 8 hours, I believe, of confinement inside the building, and we had the lull. Of course, the next morning it was all over, and except for the damage that was done. Now, we had a Model T Ford in the family, and we got back down as far as it used to be the old Kilgore warehouse. It's probably along there about where where you get your driver's license now, if you've been up there. Only it was on the other side of the road from where the police Florida Highway Patrol Station is. And we had to stop there. That was as far as the road from there on. Now, the reason why that is, in this area of the lake, over the years, the lake has built up from starting down here at Pahokee at the airport and going up this way and all the way up to Okeechobee is what they call the ridge. And this ridge was pretty well, it was the only road that came into Pahokee, of course, because it was washed out from here down. I have an uncle that lived, well, you know where Mr. Salvatore's house is, about halfway between there and Pahokee is where he lived. And now he went through the hurricane all right, but it had backed up and filled up enough water out in the lowlands and out into the muck that when the wind quit blowing and the lake came back and it was lower than everything else, and gravity, the water was seeking its level, so consequently the gravity of it pulled it across that ridge, and it came across right where my uncle's house was. And it carried his house and everything back out into the lake and destroyed it. They weren't hurt because it was after the storm, practically. The storm was over the next day, and you could see it starting to cut through there, and they got out and it wasn't lost. None of my family or anybody that I really knew personally, or friends of ours was lost in that hurricane because we were up on the higher part of the lake and didn't have the water. The water was the thing that caused all the damage. The wind caused the water to move, and that caused the damage. I guess I was fortunate that my dad was an Englishman, came over in about 1905, and he worked. He came over on for a work crew and helped build the first FEC railroad down to the Keys. And he got caught down there in a hurricane in the Keys in about 1915, and he just got out by the last train that brought the crew out of there, and they lost a lot of people down there. I may have the dates wrong on that 1950, but I've heard him talk about it. But he was totally scared of a hurricane, and this was to our advantage because every time there was a hurricane, he made sure that we got into a place where we would be safe, and consequently we came through all those years, and we used to have hurricanes pretty regular. But that's about the amount of experience that I had with the hurricane, but I sure don't enjoy them. As a kid, you know, I didn't think too much about them. Thought, well, it was just a good time to get out, and we'd get out and go camp out and sleep out and have fun all night and whatnot. But it was, I can remember them picking up and people and just putting them in the back of a truck and hauled them up to Fort Miaca, and that's where they had the machine that does the hole, drag line that does the hole, and we put them in there, put them in a iron box, and just bury them away. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer anybody's questions you might answer.
What was it like inside the warehouse or everything that you were saying? Was it hot or?
Inside the building, I don't remember, whether it was hot or not. A kid that's got a lot of energy and whatnot, and without any worries, it probably didn't affect us any. We would, I don't think it was a racket. I can remember that it was awful noisy. Because if you've ever been in a tin building and you get one piece of tin that comes loose and it gets to flapping, it beats pretty heavy. And I'm sure that it was a lot of racket all night. And, but, you know, it doesn't seem to bother young people as much as it does the old people.
The memorial that's up at Fort Miaca says, I think this is correct, that there are 1,700 people buried there. Do you think that's an accurate estimate?
I think so, because they hauled them out of there. Now, last night is the first time I realized that they hauled some to West Palm Beach.
All the records that we had indicated that the majority of the people were taken to Woodlawn Cemetery in West Palm Beach. That's why when we went up to Fort Miaca and saw the memorial, and it said 1,700 people. You know, they said easily that many in West Palm Beach also. It just seems like somewhere, I know it was very difficult, I'm sure, to keep records and things at that time.
Well, I didn't, I'd never really heard. I guess on the north end of the lake that, from Pahokee Canal Point and up that way and out in the surrounding area. And incidentally, Pahokee was the largest city then on the lake. That was back, I don't know whether y'all know it or not, but everybody from Lewiston, well, this side of Lewiston, to Fort Miaca went to Pahokee High School when I did. We had the Beardsleys, which lived just inside Palm Beach County. And then we had the Couches that lived just on the outside of Palm Beach County on the north side up there that came to Pahokee High School. So we were the largest community on the lake at that time. And but as I say, we didn't. Most of it was the people that were outside off of the ridge and didn't seek to, and back then you had what they called quarters for the workers to live in on each farm. So there was a lot of those that drowned it because they were, and they didn't get into
One of those
safety.
pictures in the film, afterwards, was looking down the road toward the quarters in Tahoe.
That area was damaged real bad, because it was, again, as I say, the water does the damage. And this is one of the old timers are still scared of that dike out there. You know, back in, what year? Since I've been back here, I guess, and I came back in 49, we've had one that washed that lake that dike pretty good along there just south of the airport. They had quite an erosion there, and the matter of fact is they felt like they only liked about 10 feet of washing it out. And so since then they have planted trees and put boulders and whatnot to break it up. Back then it was a raw dike pretty much. So.
You talking about the Pahokee Airport? Over on the side of the dike, they got asphalt all the way down the side.
Well, that's the area that eroded real bad. That's right, they did put asphalt on that. It's still there.
Yeah.
There's grass on it.
Grass growing over it.
That's the only place where the grass doesn't completely cover the dike.
That's where the erosion was, and that's where they filled it in and replaced it.
We read a report that said, from the Army Corps of Engineers, that said that they had put a lot of Australian pine trees along the dike, thinking that they would be a windbreak. But what they have discovered over the years is that the roots from the Australian pine tree go through the dike, because they're very strong roots, and have actually created breaks and weaknesses in the dike structure itself. And up around, when they had the flooding up around Okeechobee at that big power plant at one point, a lot of that they said they felt was caused by the Australian pine trees having weakened the dike.
That water, as I recall, though, that water didn't come out of the lake. That came out of their created pond.
Right, but they had put the pine trees there. But we talked to a gentleman named Layman Hardy. Have you ever heard of
I
Layman?
went to school with him.
Okay, well, he has written, he's got a new project. What he's trying to do is get cypress trees planted all along the area. And he feels like the cypress trees are perfect for a windbreak around the lake area, around the dike area, because the roots are not strong like the Australian pine trees, and they live in water. And he would like for everybody out here to start growing cypress trees.
Well, I've got one in my yard.
Well, see, you've done your part. He thinks that it'll be a good, that when the soil, if the soil does eventually play out, that the cypress tree would be a good industry for the area.
It could very well be. Speaking of the Australian pine or the Brazilian oak or whatever you want to call that thing, you know, we thought at one time the canals, and incidentally I've very much been interested in the canals over the years, and the roads and blades. Thought that the thing to do is to keep people out of canals was to plant those Australian pines between the road and the canal. Well, since then we've spent millions of dollars cutting them down, hauling them off, because they didn't do anything but contribute to our misery. And first of all, just like you said, they've got such a root system, and they'll go along, and as you go across, you get this bump. That's because the high points is where the roots are, and in between the trees is the soft spot, and it'll beat out, so you get a bump as you go down, and that's one of those. And the next thing it is that they have a very high tendency to want the tops to break out of them and to fall onto the highway. So that was a mistake that was made way back in the 30s.
They just cut those all down recently.
We did that in the last 5 or 6 years. You know. And
when I moved down here, I moved down about 5 years ago or so, and they were all up, and then they started cutting them all down.
yeah, you know why? You know what brought it to a head? This is the tragic part of the whole thing is in society today is that the fact that people, you know, you can go along and tell them, hey, this is dangerous, and nobody will take notice of it until somebody's killed. Well, you remember the young girl, or you may not recall, but there was a young girl killed just north of the courthouse up here when a tree fell. And this got their attention. And from that, we were able to push and get those trees cut down by the Department of Transportation. Took a special act almost to get that done, but we did get that, and it's tragic that somebody had to die before we get something done. So often that happens.
About how long does an Australian pine, what's the life of an Australian pine?
You mean till they get
So they get
maturity?
to the point that they do topple, I think.
Well, I don't think there's anything that does that. Well, the second mistake I left out on that. They planted the trees and they grew so tall and they were falling over that they were creating a hazard. You know, they would get the roots, or something would happen, or they would rot, or for some reason they die and one fall over. So somebody got the idea that, well, the thing to do is to go in and cut them off at about 20 feet and they'll die. Well, an Australian pine doesn't die when you cut it. They found out, and we all found out, they don't die when you cut them off at 20 feet or cut the bud. There's no bud in them. And all it did was that they just sprouted out. And it was the limbs that was starting to fall off that was causing a lot of traffic hazards on the road. And you get a storm or something, and you couldn't hardly get over the road because of that. So you know, I think in 10 years, you can get a good sized tree out of an Australian. You could really use it for lumber or pulp. It would be a fast growing tree. It would be a good industry for the country.
What are they used for?
Nothing. They don't even make good barbecue with it. No.
You can't build with Australian pine wood.
No. They're more of a shrubbery than they don't have too much of a trunk. They just sprout out, you know, all the way up. Almost as bad as cypress is. But cypress knots will stay in and makes a pretty design.
You don't think those palm trees along the roads are dangerous? Because like when the wind starts blowing, all those things, the dead limbs will fall out on the road.
Those, they contribute more to the trash than they do a hazard so far. But I'm amazed that with no more root system in one of those things has got that it even stays up there.
Because when we had that hurricane or whatever come through not too long ago, just a lot of wind we had, well, I was riding down the road and there was a car in front of me, and one of the things fell right in front of it. And I had to swerve to miss him, and he slammed on the brakes. And I mean, we almost had a wreck because of the palm tree.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you another thing, too. I say this happens, and wind will cause a lot of things. But we have coconut in our yard, and Heather knows that we have the restrictions that you walk around that coconut tree because her grandmother has been hit twice by a coconut falling out of that tree.
Listen, avocado trees will do the same thing to you. It would be a dangerous thing to be under an avocado tree.
Yeah, well, you have many of those avocados too, but coconut that falls, and this tree has gotten up there. This tree is getting to be probably going to be hazardous to our house. You know, another thing now, while we're talking about trees, I had some visitors up on top of our plant over there, which is 3 stories high, and you can look out over Belgrade pretty much with it. And they commented about how many trees we had. And I don't know what's ever occurred to you or not, but every tree that's in Belgrade is planted. It's not a natural tree in Belgrade, with probably the exception of a custard apple or two that somebody still that can grow around. But every tree has had to be planted, and that's unique.
I thought about that today.
It was, because this was all willows or tall grass or something of that sort.
Well, last year when we went looking for custard apple trees because we had red Willisburg, and we wanted to see this because you talked about them, being everywhere. We had a really hard time finding them.
There's only 2 that I knew of, and I think one of them's been cut down now.
Well, one huge old one is in Mr. Salvatore's front yard.
Oh yeah,
Wonderful
up there. Gold Elementary has got one in there.
But it's a little one.
Yeah.
And there's one in front of the Chamber of Commerce that you're already.
But they planted that one there recently, I guess.
It had fruit left.
This, it's 715 in Airport Road there, and that trailer park there, Ms. Williams is their name now. There was a couple custard apple trees there, because I got fruit off from it and tried to grow some. I got them to sprout, but they died.
Mr. Shiver has them out at Springhouse Nursery.
He does have them out there now.
We found them up at Crooked Hook Campground. There's a little lake area to the south of it, and around that, there are about 5 custard apple trees.
Not very many
And
anymore.
somebody told me that if I could get over to one of the islands, that there were a lot of custard apple trees they thought still on the island.
Well, at one time there was way out on this Kramer here, out on this island. Well, let's see, we come on another. Which one do we come on? This one and this one here, Tory. Well, on one of these islands, I believe it's Kramer out here.
That's what that corn.
Is there a bridge
Yeah.
to one of those islands?
Man,
Is there a bridge to one of those islands?
not anymore.
There used to be a bridge out there.
And somebody told me there was a bridge.
There's a burn bridge out there.
Yeah, well, there used to be twin bridges out here. If you've heard of the word twin bridges, there's one across here and one across here. But when the flood control bought up all of those islands out there, well, when Fritz Stein, they were out on this island last, and they moved out, and those bridges have been burned, I think, to keep people from going out there.
And there's supposedly some buildings out there that were original to the island.
Well, they were used to that one right here, that's where they used to come in with their mail and whatnot. And my wife's dad at one time had the contract from Pahokee to Torrey Isle and carry the mail, and they carried it by boat. And
Which island was it that Mrs. Van Horn's parents lived on? Was it the
I'm not sure. Not sure which island they were, but most of these, and I think it would have to be this series of here, either Torrey or Cayman. I don't think anybody's ever lived on Ritter. They farmed that out there. Mutt Thomas and Billy Rogers at one time farmed this island out here. But I don't believe anybody ever lived there. I might be wrong. It's a long time ago.
Where was the Pahokee High School that you went to? Was it where the
The
Rick
present,
was put in?
well, not the present, but the old building that sits right there.
It's still, that's the original building?
That was the original building. It was 2-story, then they built the wing going out the back.
Which one, the one in the front?
The one there in front, that was built, that was there and then.
It was pretty new, wasn't it, at that time?
Well, yeah, it was there in the 30s. I can remember the early 30s it was there.
And what other buildings that can you think of that are still standing that were there during the 1928 storm?
Well, that one was there. Let's see. There's you probably wouldn't recognize it, but it's a hotel now, but it was the old hospital in Pahokee. It's on the Belgrade Road, and just a little bit, I don't know, I get mixed up. I always thought the Main Street in Pahokee runs north and south, but it runs east and west, and that's confusing. So it would be just as you were coming out on the left there, that building was there, and next to it was a 2-story, but it was owned by Hawkins, which the local gunsmith here in town, that was his dad's old home place. And let's see now, they're on I don't believe any of those on Main Street. Creel used to have a house there, but it floated down Main Street, and that was back in about 36, and it wasn't ever cut back, and they built that 2-story hotel and doctor's office there, and Dr. Creel. And that's about the only one that I believe was there at the time, back in those days. The rest of them. Back then, most of them were, or all of them were wood houses. It'd be interesting to know what was the first CBS house built. I worked with a construction firm in the late 30s, and we built a Pahokee Elementary School, and we built in Belgrade the Sanders Building, which is on A and Main Street. But we didn't use concrete blocks. They brought them in by rail. We used a tile, in fact, the interlocking tile. Those were built out of. So,
What type of building do you think best withstand a hurricane? You think the wood because it is, or?
that's, you know, it's hard to say because you can see where a tornado goes through. Of course, they're different and they create a more of a vacuum, I guess, than a hurricane would. But I've seen some of those that look like CBS buildings that just went down. But I don't know, everybody seems to think that they wanted to get in a CBS building, but if once the roof goes off of one of them, I don't know what's going to happen then. It's hard to say. I know that over the years that wood buildings have been able to stay in there, that they give and they don't crack and split and bust open as bad as the CBS does. Of course, once you get CBS falling, it starts to topple. It's really dangerous then. It's a lot more so than the wood. So I would know that I'm pretty sure I'd get into CBS.
Do you stay here if there's a hurricane coming, or do you leave?
I've been one of them that has never left the area. Now, we used to have a lot of people that, man, when a hurricane was coming, and I had a brother that would, he would get his family and go out, go up to Sebring one time. When they got caught up in Sebring one time, the hurricane missed us and the eye went right over Sebring. So, no, I've never run. I think you're just as safe here as you'll take the precautions that you would be any place now, as long as you get the stronger buildings and stay in it. I don't think we'll have the water problem that we had there before. I hope that dike, although that dike, you know, it's built up 20 feet of head and comes through that dike and cuts through there, that's when you get to the real problem, the real danger, because it'll just wash everything in front of you.
Well, that's what a lot of people indicated to us. They felt like that the little dike that was there, the little mud and sand dike, created more of a problem because it held the water back, and then when it did come, it came in one giant wave. And they felt like that was...
That's true. And you take that and you take what we've got out there now. Although this is another thing, you know, there's controversy going on about whether we should ever bring that lake up to 22 feet or not. Well, I tell you, if they ever bring that lake up to 22 feet, I'm going to reconsider the statement I just made. There's 22 feet of water in that lake with just that dike holding it back there. I don't know whether I want to be in any kind of a building in this area. Of course,
Well, what's the lake at right now? What's the lake at right now?
About 13 feet. 13 and a half, and
that'd be up against the dike.
it'd be up against the dike. That's what I'm saying.
Can flood control have the ability to do that?
Well, that was their objective at one time, wasn't it? Is to bring that thing up to 22 feet. They talk about 17 occasionally now, but I think everybody is convinced them that, you know, we may need the water, but we don't need that much in any area.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to do, provide enough water for all the homes that they have in service.
When the water's the lowest out on the dike, there's a whole lot of beach. But recently the water's been very high, and some of the trees, the roots are starting to show, and some of them are coming up rooted.
Talking about the beach on there, lake over there. That lake was a pretty lake at one time, back when I was a kid. We used to get our drinking water. We'd take the mule and go out to just as far as he'd go out in there and get the water up in the barrel and bring it in and drink it. And that sounded good, but you wouldn't dare do that now.
They had nice beaches too, didn't they?
Oh yeah, there were sand beaches. You know, beautiful sand beaches.
Was there a lot of alligators and snakes on it?
Yeah, but there was a lot of them everywhere back then. You didn't have them cornered up as much as you do now. You had a lot of swamp land and they were spread out pretty good.
And a lot of them stay Beach in Tahoe. Went up there to get fossils, and we saw lots of snakes up there. Sunbathing, yes. That little, is that
It's
what
right inside the marina.
as you go up the ridge, you turn to your right, and the parking lot kind of dead ends down
Yes,
there.
sir.
And then we walk
Okay.
north there.
They don't have rocks down there yet?
There were times, this was last year, about this time of the year, and we saw, I bet, like 6 or 7 snakes.
It was raining.
Yeah, well, it wasn't when we first got there.
Y'all probably dealt with snakes a little bit, and I heard something the other day that I never really heard before or never thought about. The way you can tell where it's a poisonous snake or not is how he swims. You ever heard that? If he swims on top of the water, he won't bite you. I mean, he's not poisonous. But if he swims with his head up above the water, that's a poisonous snake with his body submerged.
Well, I thought you were gonna say the poisonous when you swim underwater.
Well, no, they swim, you know, kind of with their head up like this. And the others get up on top of the
Like
water.
a glide, like on top of
I don't ever stick around and see what they
Yeah, we wait long enough to figure it out. How do you swim? No, they crawl on land with us that we saw.
I heard that theory just here in the last couple weeks.
Well, I just assume they're all poisonous.
That's good.
I just stay away from those snakes in the water.
That's good as well.
Anybody else have any
I've seen
questions?
some snakes, they'll go off into the water and they just go under the water.
Well, they'll come up short.
Yeah, they come up.
They just dive and come up. But if they come up and swim like this, they say that's the poison. That's what it comes up and swims on top of the water with its whole body.
I wonder why that is.
I don't know. I don't even know the truth.
Oh, the poison's heavy and it makes them sick.
And real good research is something for you to think about when you're reading about it.
I have to read to see why that would be.
With my luck, if he poisonous when he forget the swim.
Right, it would be his trick for you, Adam. Watch me fool Adam. Anybody else have any questions?
Well, you like it down here?
Yeah, I like it here. I was born. Incidentally, I was in the governor's office several years ago on Roadville to this area, and Governor Graham was up there, and, you know, he wanted to kind of let us know that he was familiar with the area, and he wanted to know if anybody knew what Pinsuco was. Pinsuco. I have to always stop to say it right. Any of you ever figured out where Pinsuco is? Pinsuco. That stands for Pennsylvania Sugar Corporation. Well, he said it's right across from where I was born and where the old Graham house is on Road 27 going into Miami. Now, have you ever seen that? If you haven't, the next time you go to Miami, just as you get to where Rinker's big cement mill is over across the canal, if you'll notice along there's a big stone 2-story house. That's where Governor Graham was born down. I was born across the track, across the canal. And well, Pinsuco, we actually was born in Hialeah, but my folks lived in Pinsuco. And since then, I've lived in Miami, got run over with an automobile in Miami, and I left there.
Well, good.
Lived in Fort Lauderdale, and then we moved out to Canal Point, and we moved back to West Palm Beach, and we moved out to late in 26, 27, early 27, I guess it was, and was here. And since then, I've been a Glades resident with the exception of the time that I served in the military service from 1942 to 46. And then when I came back from the University of Florida in 1949, I moved to Belgrade, and I'm retiring at the end of June next month. I've been 39 years with Pioneer Road. Over there, served everything from the bookkeeper when I came there to being the general manager. And I'm going to hang it up after all these years.
What are they gonna do without you?
Well, they'll get along. Everybody's replaceable.
Are you gonna stay in Belgrade, or are you gonna?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We decided years ago that, you know, this is where we spent all our life, and this is the place to be. You know, we've been around, seen the rest of it, and I don't know, we just like it out here. I don't know that I'd recommend it for somebody though. Tell you, there's some problems here. Over the years, I've tried to hire engineers and whatnot to run our plant. We have refrigeration over there. That's something outstanding. I just have to be honest with them and tell them, hey, I can pay you the amount of money you're getting right now, but when you come to Belgrade, you got problems. There's nothing out there for you young people to do, they say. And there's nothing, no schools, there's this, that, and the other. So, in the end, it's hard to get people to come out here, and I can appreciate it. But I wouldn't leave for nothing.
Well, Mr. Unwin, I think it's people like you that have made the area what it is, and without people putting back into it what you and your family have, we wouldn't have what we do have. And I think we need more people that are willing to stay and to work hard to achieve, which is what your life's been here anyway. You've worked hard to achieve, and you have achieved things. And without that, I don't think we would have these children here today in the school listening to you.
Well, that's true, and I appreciate those words, but it's a challenge out here, and it's going to be more of a challenge, I'm afraid. But I don't know, we got people now with opening up in full lane State Road 80, and I think we just took a server to West Palm Beach now. It's going to help us a lot. I can tell the number of people coming out fishing on the weekend just at the restaurant. It's tremendous, the increase from what it was a couple of years ago. And this kind of thing.
And everything's moving west.
Yeah. And somebody was telling me the other day that they was talking to a man and wife who rented them a place out at the marina out here and parked their trailer, and they come out every weekend. This is a way of getting away from the rat race over there.
Well, they have quite a little community out there. I know in the winter it's a great place to be. They have people that come every year and have friendships and lots of activities in the evening for them.
We've got a man from Walla Walla, Washington in our office now that's selling corn. He's down here for the corn deal. That's another story. But anyhow, he comments about people out here. He just can't get over. I tell you, he is a Rotarian, and he went to Rotary with me yesterday. And see the family style that we eat and the people, how friendly they are and whatnot. He's real impressed. So we've got something in our favor out here, whether we all agree to it or not. But it's a great community.
Well, I know if you talk to teachers who have taught in the area, they'll tell you there's an ability to attend and see. It's great too.
Do they come from both Jasper?
No, they weren't any from Biloxi, but they were from Del Glebe, a lot of places. Sure they were. Anybody else have any questions? Well, we're just delighted that you would share your experiences with us.
I hope I've been able to help you. I've enjoyed it. I'll just keep studying. I tell you that now you're facing college, and college is not as bad as you turn out off.
I was thinking it was a little later than that.
Yeah, I moved my family here in 1939.
Ah, that's what I remembered then. Perhaps you could begin by telling us what circumstances brought you here.
All right. On the 15th of May, I completed my senior year in high school. And on the 16th of May, I was on what is known as Vinegar Bend, and that's where the bowling alley is now. My father-in-law was farming that particular area, and I brought a truck and 15 bean pickers to the glade. They were having a time getting bean pickers. And I picked beans there on the 16th of May, 1931. And I will forget it, I picked 22 hampers for 20 cents a piece. That's $4.40. And that was a lot of money in those days. As a matter of fact, I hired a fellow for $2 to drive a truck to haul the beans. We had to haul them to Canal Point to load them on the train. Then I come back again in 1933 to the Glades as an employee of the United States Engineer Department. I worked on this levee, which is known as the Hoover Levee, which was the condition that came about after the 28th storm to put the levee around Lake Okeechobee in order to contain the water and not have a repetition of the 28th storm. So that's about, I came here in 33 and worked for a while on that, and then as they moved our boat someplace else. And then I come back in 37 as a life insurance salesperson, and I sold life insurance from 37 to 41. Then at 41 I moved to the housing authority as the assistant manager, and I stayed there until 81. So I stayed there 40 years and 4 months. So that's about what has happened to me with being here in the Glades.
Well, where were you from?
Eastman, Dodge County, Georgia. They ran me out of there in 1921. And we moved to Stewart. My wife's parents were living in Stewart. They'd migrated south because they wanted to get off the farm. We moved there in 1921. So that's where we lived from 21 to 39 before I moved out here in 1939. As you mentioned about someone who was here, Mrs. Anna Blackshear, her family, they lived here in Belgrade, and they went to what was known as the Fears Hotel up on Main Street that they demolished here about 8 or 10 months ago. They demolished the old Fears Hotel, and they went to the second floor, and like they were above, they could hear the water slapping up against the ceiling. So that's how deep it got on Main Street. My wife had a cousin his family was out here. They lived in what was known as Stein's Quarters now, on the road to the marina. You notice there was the quarters over to the left there, housing, and they moved up to the old store, which is still standing there, West's Grocery, and he brought his family up there, and they were in that building upstairs. He went back to get some more clothes, and the wave of water come through and just picked him up and carried him to the area across the railroad track where the ice house, the old ice house sits now here in Belgrade on, they call it Airport Road, Northwest Avenue L, and he clung to the crossbar of a light pole for some 26 or 28 hours. He stayed there until the water had receded, and then someone come along and rescued him. The rescue squad came in and rescued him. He couldn't find his wife and children. So they assumed that they had perished along with the other over 2,800 people. In Stewart, we met a memorial service for the family. And then he just never give up looking. And he went into a center in West Palm Beach where they set up a camp to take care of the refugees, the refugee camp center. And he goes in there and he finds his wife and children.
Oh my God.
And that was 3.5 weeks after the hurricane.
And that was your wife's father?
Cousin. Yes.
Oh my Lord. What was his name?
His name was Charles Green. His wife's name was Eunice. She's still living. She's in Philadelphia. I saw her last year. She's still living she lives in Philadelphia now, but Charles has passed on.
Oh my Lord. Did a lot of people come from the coastal area out to the Glades because they got to get work in the field?
Yes, that was why they came out here. Well, they came from all over. Well, when I came to the Glades in 37, there was only about 1,000 people here in the Glades, in Belle Glades there. Pahokee had a larger population. They had around 2,000 in population in 37. And it has been gratifying to be part of this community and to see what has happened over a span of 55 years.
Can you tell us what it was like when you first came to Belle Glade, when you first moved here?
Yes, there was no housing, I think about in 31. On the area where the Florida Federal sits now, there was a barn there. Man had hay, and I had his name came to me this morning. He was a man who developed the Ramey plant here in Belle Glade. And he moved up to west of Okeechobee, not at Brighton and the other place over there. You go around the lake from Okeechobee, and he moved up there. He retired, moved up there. Well, he developed the Ramey, but he had this old barn and a machine shop all over there. That was the only place we could find to sleep. We did get some room for the ladies, and we got the hay. I had a piece of canvas on there, and I put it over the hay, and took my seat off of the truck, and that was my pillow. That's where we slept. That when I first came here. Then as they began to build houses, they built what was known as rooming houses. They built a two-story building, and they just put rooms on each side, run a hall down it, and even then you didn't have bathrooms inside, you had them outside. They called the outhouses. By 1937, though, they had gotten into the septic tanks and built bath facilities, except out into your labor camps. It was just literally dotted all over the Glades because people had to struggle to get labor, because when beans got ready, or cabbage got ready, you needed somebody to harvest it. Beans didn't last for so long. And it was called the day haul then. You got paid every night. You got paid a ticket at the time of you picked a hamper of beans, or you got a ticket on every, you got paid for the car for cutting cabbage. 5 men made up a crew for cutting cabbage. And they would cut a car and a half a day, usually get $50 for cutting a carload of cabbage. They had to cut them and pack them in the crate. They had to make their own crates. In other words, they had the crate broken down, you had to put it together. But people had a lot more money during the time of beans than to do with your cane now. See, the cane is a limited number of people who are involved into the sugar cane. Well, it takes less labor to plant it and cultivate it, and less people to harvest it. And especially where they're working every day trying to mechanize the complete harvesting of sugar cane. As you know, Talisman sugar is completely mechanized. They don't have any hand cutting of that cane crop. Talisman sugar does. Oh yes, they're completely completely mechanized. And the labor pool, the Belgrade has their needs, well, the whole blaze, is for some other type of industry that can maintain employment for people year-round here. You see, where it's seasonal, that's why we lose so many of our young people who go to college and get a profession. They have to go someplace else. But though they still need people to carry on to be a community. Speaking about Ms. Campbell, about the exceptional child, well, I just thought of that. We had been put off, well, it's just like they built 2 other exceptional child centers, and we were the first who asked for one out here in the Glade. All right, they kept putting it off. They built the one at the north area of well, they were building them all about. And we asked for them, and then the money gets frozen just as they get the plans completed. So that's why we started our bombardment of letters to the state, to our representatives, and to the Secretary of the Department of Education for the state. We, well, thanks to Mr. Robert Walker, who was a faculty member at Pahokee High, and the efforts of the folks at Gold Elementary and other schools here in the area, in 10 days we put 1,500 letters in Tallahassee concerning the exceptional child center. So as soon as that money was released, they didn't send us a telegram, they called us, then they sent us a letter to let us know that the money had been released and the exceptional child center for Gold Elementary for the Belgrade area would be forthcoming. It's amazing what unity can do, planning, but you've got to have togetherness. And that goes back to the regular child life. I just looked at wasted effort yesterday, that at one of the schools they have to call police there because you've got folks who live on one street, they've got one gang, and another group live on another street's got another gang, and they're fighting, going to school together and can't even get along. So kids nowadays certainly need to get their priorities in the right perspective. Know which way they're going, how they're going to get to an ultimate end in life. And without planning and setting some goals and working towards that, and digging ditches make your hands sore. I tried it. That's why I stayed in school as long as I could. And to think that the person nowadays could go to college and arrive there with, well, I was fixing to catch the train and only had $64. And my father walked up to me and handed me some money rolled up with a rubber band around it. He said, son, that's all I've got. You got to make it go as far as you can. And when I got on the train, I opened it up. It was $20 bills that he had saved for me to go to college. So nice. It cost a lot then. It's amazing what it costs you now. It costs $22 a month for room and board. All right. It costs $50 per semester, per quarter, for registration to the school. See now. Of course, I went to a church school. I went to Presbyterian school in Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee.
Oh, really?
Yes, I went to Knoxville College. And it's a very beautiful school, beautiful faculty, and they really taught you something, not only about Christ, but about the academics of life. Anyway, I gave up a lot of things to get the little bit of educational background that I have. I couldn't go to the picnics because they paid you 20 cents an hour for working on the campus. My father happened to have had a stroke 1932, so he just never did get able to work anymore. He lived until 1950 before he passed. But my parents had made such sacrifices for me that I felt that I needed to go to work to help support them and my family. Because I married between my junior and senior year in high school. And my wife and I finished high school in 1931 on the 15th of May. All right, then when I get to college, that's when we start a family, after we get to college. So then that meant that I had, because I was from the old school that the latest place was at home and the man that was supposed to earn the living for me. So I've been working ever since. I've had 4 jobs since the 4th of June, 1932. I got home from school on the first day of June, 1932. On the 4th of June, I was going to work for the United States Engineer Department.
That was out here?
Well, that was out of the Jacksonville office. I was living at Stewart then. But my brother had an emergency. He had to rush him to Key West to the Naval Hospital. That's being worked with the United States government, and they sent him to the Naval Hospital there. Jacksonville was closer to Key West for him to go there and get his appendectomy, have an appendectomy. And
Quite a way to go for an appendectomy, wasn't
yes,
it?
it sure was. So he asked him if his brother worked in his place while he was in the hospital. So they did. I worked so hard and did my work so well that they hired my brother back in another position, gave him a higher position, and plus we had a cook to leave from the boat, and so they gave me his job as they called it a bedroom steward. In other words, you clean up the staterooms on the boat, and then you work in the dining room and wait the table for the officers.
What boat was this?
That was the Sarasota I was on. It was a government dredge that we worked on Lake Okeechobee and down there close to waterways.
And you stayed out on the lake, on the boat, when they were building the levee.
Yes.
Could you tell us about that? What it was like when they were building the levee?
Well, they would have to dynamite the rock. They'd have to they had a dynamite crew who would go through and drill into the rock and plant the dynamite and blow it up. They'll loosen the rock up. Then they'd come along with these dredges. They load the boom down in there and just turn and grind and suck and then pump out. And all that material you see on the levee was pumped up there out of Lake Okeechobee. That's why the rim canal is there. That's 30 to 35 feet deep.
That's where you dug up
You dug up the material there and pumped it up on the levee. Now the levee is supposed to be approximately 250 feet wide, I believe it is. They've had to go back and pump some more on it since it was built, because there are areas where when the water would rise up, they find that they had some seepage. So they have corrected all of that now.
The lake boundaries, were they where they are now when you came here, or were there different boundaries to the lake?
Well, they had already, in 31, they'd already started working on the levee. They went right to work after the 28th storm to begin working on it. On this area here, now you take it was in the late 50s, I believe, when they finished up the area up towards Okeechobee. But you used to ride along there and just look out across the lake going from here to Okeechobee. Yeah, and they were still working on it. Well, you take in the 70s, all of that work was done there at Fort Meander. All the levee was built in there. Because I know our boat used to in the coastal waterway in that canal, canal coming, St. Lucie Canal coming from Stewart. We dug that out. Then we did a lot of pumping around the Rim Canal. See, the Rim Canal, they call it the Rim Canal because they cut through some land. You could see how far the land. See, at one time the land went on out what made islands, which they call Tory Islands and the various islands that we have here now. And because they used to farm those.
There was a lot of boat traffic though on the lake at that time, wasn't there?
Oh yes, because there were a lot of the catfishing was really something back in those days. They didn't have the limitations like they finally put on it for the other fish. And instead of me doing all the talking, I'd like to address some answers to some of the questions the kids might have. Yes.
Did you ever have any problems with alligators?
No, because it used to be nice to me to find a bed of alligators and catch them, sell them.
Who could sell them to?
Huh?
Who did you sell them
Oh, you could sell them to anybody back then. And as a kid like you, yes. Maybe it's growing out now. But there, you can see the marks there where I messed with a little gator and he caught the thing and he bit me. You used to catch them this size and you sell them for $1.50. And where I lived there in Stewart, like from here out to the road out there, was a pond area and there were gators in it. That's close to my house. And we boys would go there and catch those young gators and sell them.
Did you sell them to tourists?
Yes, to tourists, anybody. You find somebody to buy them.
I know my husband, they used to come down here when he was a child.
He used to buy baby
Buy
alligators.
baby alligators and take them back up north.
Yes.
That's why they say they're in the sewers in New York City. That there's some big alligators in the sewers in New York City.
Then I've seen some big alligators in my lifetime. I've seen some 15, 16 feet long. But you see, I wasn't actually out in the water per se on the boat. See, I stayed on the boat. Now there were men who worked out on the pipelines. See, they had a suction to the dredge where they'd suck the material in. Then it went through where it was pumped out through the pipelines, and that's the way that they had men who were called linemen who moved those pipelines about and where they pumped the material out, and they just determined how much material it would take to the height they wanted to get it. I didn't stay in the galley too long. They found out I could cook, so then I started cooking. But one day they had an incident where they got behind with the reports and didn't have anybody there to do the reports. But modestly speaking, I'm a mathematician. If I could write, I would have been a CPA. But I had a time writing. I never did learn to write very well. But with figures, I go to the store and as they ring it up, I add it up. Then I put my hand over the register and tell